Cole Mercer lay flat against the crumbling rooftop, the city's evening haze settling around him like a muted shroud. The rifle beneath his hands felt less like a weapon and more like an extension of his will, honed through years of training and an unspoken promise he carried for the people still trapped below. Every breath he drew was deliberate, measured, aligning his heartbeat with the slow drift of dust floating through the fractured skyline. The Aurelian occupation had turned the once bustling district into a husk of ruined streets. But Cole remained, unseen and unyielding, the last sentinel watching over a place he refused to abandon. From his vantage point, he observed the alien patrols with caution. Their movements were rigid, efficient, and steeped in the arrogance of conquerors convinced their victory was absolute. The officers among them displayed even greater confidence, striding across elevated platforms with their helmets tucked under their arms, exposing the gleaming ridges of their armor as if daring any human to challenge them. Cole tracked them through the scope, noting patterns and the lapses in discipline that revealed more than the aliens intended. He rarely allowed emotion to guide him, but the mockery they broadcast across the district had begun to stir something he fought to keep buried. His earpiece crackled periodically, a reminder that he was not entirely alone, though Central Command had been silent for hours. Their final instruction lingered in his mind with a weight that refused to dissipate. Hold position until green light. The simplicity of the order belied the complexity of the situation. Cole knew reinforcements were spread thin, communication unstable, and survival dependent on restraint. Still, the absence of further guidance left him with a gnawing unease that pressed against the edges of his disciplined calm. Below, in the dimly lit alleys, he spotted scattered groups of civilians moving cautiously from one collapsed structure to another. They relied on the shadows more than any coordinated resistance could offer, guided by whispered directions and their own desperate intuition. Cole watched over them, marking potential dangers like checkpoints on a map only he could see. Protecting them was not part of his formal orders, but it had become an unspoken mission nonetheless. Each time an Aurelian patrol drifted too close, Cole steadied himself, ready to intervene if he had no other choice. As dusk deepened, a group of alien officers assembled on the roof of their administrative tower, their voices amplified by suit-integrated speakers. One stepped forward and projected a hologram of a human sniper fumbling with an outdated rifle. Laughter erupted among the officers, echoing across the ravaged streets. The insult barely registered with Cole. What mattered was the insight their mockery revealed. They believed Earth's defenders were relics, incapable of adaptation or meaningful resistance. That miscalculation was dangerous for both sides, and Cole knew arrogance had a tendency to collapse under the weight of reality. He shifted his position, recalibrating his scope as the officers continued their performance. Despite their confidence, he could see hints of tension beneath their theatrics. Glances cast toward the silent buildings, subtle stiffening whenever distant echoes carried. They feared what they did not understand, and the concept of a hidden human sniper unsettled them more than they dared to admit. Cole exhaled slowly and steadied himself for another long stretch of waiting. The city might have fallen, but the fight within it had not. As the alien officers resumed their crude demonstrations, Cole felt the first flicker of certainty that the balance would soon shift. Whatever came next, he would be ready. He remained vigilant. Cole remained on the rooftop as the sun dipped lower, casting long, skeletal shadows across the ruins. The Aurelians had grown bolder with each hour of occupation, striding openly through the district as if daring any remaining human defender to challenge them. Their officers moved with an ease that unsettled Cole, not because he envied their confidence, but because confidence made them unpredictable. Overconfidence made them dangerous. He noted their patterns with meticulous care, tracking the rhythm of their patrols, the way they communicated through hand signals and flickers of colored light along their armor. Every detail mattered. Every gesture hinted at a structure of command he needed to understand. Below, the human resistance was scattered across broken districts, fighting to preserve pockets of life rather than reclaim territory outright. Cole knew the city far better than most of them. He had grown up here, trained here, and watched it fall piece by piece. His role was not to lead charges or clear streets, but to protect evacuation lines for families still hiding in the labyrinth of collapsed apartments and overturned transit trams. From up high, he could guide their movement with precision, intervening only when absolutely necessary. Every round he fired had to count. Every decision had to be flawless. His earpiece sputtered again, the static momentarily forming a pattern he almost mistook for a voice. He tapped the casing, trying to coax clarity from the failing connection, but the channel dissolved into silence. The lack of communication from Central Command gnawed at him. It wasn't fear. He had long ago learned how to live with that, but the uncertainty pulled at his nerves. Without explicit authorization, he was pinned between obligation and instinct, each urging him in different directions. Across the plaza, the Aurelian officers reassembled for what looked like another spectacle. They arranged themselves in a semicircle near the administrative tower, gesturing to hovering drones that projected shimmering holograms above their heads. The images formed crude caricatures of human soldiers, wide-eyed, trembling, tripping over their own weapons. The officers laughed, a harsh, metallic sound amplified by their suits. Even from a distance, Cole could feel the disdain radiating off them, a collective sneer directed at an enemy they believed had already been beaten. He studied them with renewed focus, his gaze lingering on small details. How the highest-ranking officer stood slightly apart from the rest, how the junior staff mimicked his posture, how the drones drifted in synchronized arcs at predetermined intervals. Their arrogance gave him a blueprint. Every creature revealed its nature when it felt invincible. The Aurelians were no exception. Cole shifted his attention downward when movement caught his eye. A cluster of civilians had emerged from a nearby building, escorted by human resistance volunteers trying desperately to shepherd them toward a safer alley. Cole recognized the signs immediately. Hesitant body language, hurried steps, glances upward as if expecting danger. The volunteers were brave, but they were exposed. If the aliens noticed them, there would be no mercy. Cole adjusted his scope, tracking a patrol team, inching dangerously close to the group. He raised his radio again, voice low and urgent. Shadow Point reporting civilian movement near Tower 6. Patrol closing in. Reconfirming request for engagement authorization. He waited, straining to catch even the faintest response. Nothing came. Only the oppressive quiet of a channel barely clinging to life. A muscle twitched beneath his eye as he weighed the consequences of acting without orders. He could end the patrol with 3 precise shots, maybe 2 if he accounted for wind drift. But killing them outright would expose the civilians to retaliation if more aliens arrived before they could escape. He ground his teeth, frustration simmering beneath practiced composure. On the platform, the alien officers began a new round of mockery, this time gesturing theatrically toward Cole's building. They didn't know he was there. They simply assumed some desperate sharpshooter might be listening. Their voices carried across the rooftops, dripping with derision, describing humans as fear-bound creatures hiding in ruined nests. Cole kept his breathing steady, letting their insults flow past him like water over stone. Yet his patience thinned as the patrol moved closer to the civilians. His pulse remained even, but the pressure behind his calm intensified. He couldn't fire. Not yet. But the moment for restraint was shrinking, tightening into something sharp and inevitable. He tracked both groups, the mockers and the threatened, his mind balancing the threat landscape with clinical precision. The situation was approaching a point where decisions would no longer wait for authorization. Something was coming. He felt it in the air, in the way the city seemed to hold its breath. And as Cole shifted his weight to keep the patrol in sight, he sensed that the next few minutes would decide everything. The radio hissed again, but this time the static broke apart with a clarity sharp enough to freeze Cole mid-breath. A clipped voice pushed through the distortion, strained but unmistakably human. Shadow Point, green light granted. Priority targets, command officers. Repeat, green light. The message dissolved into crackling fragments before he could respond, but it didn't matter. Authorization had come. The waiting was over. A focused stillness settled over him, washing away every frustration and doubt. He adjusted his grip on the rifle, the metal warm from hours of contact, and felt his mind sharpen into the singular purpose he had been trained for. The alien officers on the administrative tower continued their spectacle, entirely oblivious to the shift that had just occurred. They moved in a loose arc, laughing at their holographic illusions, dissecting human behavior as if discussing a primitive species in a research lab. Their gestures were expansive, careless, as though the empty sky itself protected them. Cole studied the spacing between them, the slight differences in height, the angle of their neck plating, the glint of reflected sunlight off exposed armor vulnerabilities. Every variable aligned in his mind, forming a lattice of possibilities. He drew a slow breath through his nose, allowing the rhythm to steady his heartbeat. He selected his first target, the high-ranking officer who had taunted the city earlier. The alien stood at the center of the platform, issuing orders with a flourish that suggested absolute control. Cole dialed his scope, compensating for the mild crosswind sweeping between buildings, and let his muscles sink into the familiar posture of imminent action. There was no anger, no exhilaration, just precise intent. He exhaled and squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked with a controlled recoil. A heartbeat later, the officer staggered, the upper ridge of his armor erupting in a spray of fractured plating. He toppled backward, his collapse abrupt enough to jolt the remaining officers into startled silence. Cole watched them freeze, their expressions tightening with disbelief. Then the panic began. Aurelian soldiers scrambled across the platform, shouting in their own language, scanning the rooftops with frantic motion. Cole had no intention of staying where they expected him to be. He slid backward from his firing position, packed his rifle against his chest, and moved with swift, practiced efficiency across the rooftop. Every relocation was a dance of balance and precision, slipping between vents, ducts, and structural ridges. By the time the aliens had oriented themselves toward his original perch, he was already prone behind an old ventilation stack 20 meters away. He reacquired their positions through his scope. The aliens clustered tightly now, abandoning their earlier bravado in favor of nervous proximity. That made them easier targets. Cole chose another officer, one attempting to rally the others with wide, frantic gestures. He timed his shot with the rumble of a passing drone overhead, letting the mechanical hum mask the faint echo. The round struck cleanly, dropping the officer before the group could react. Chaos fractured their unity. The Aurelians responded with erratic fire, plasma bolts scorching the rooftops in wide, desperate arcs. They had no idea where the threat was coming from. Cole moved again, confident yet cautious, each shift designed to compound their confusion. His breathing remained even, his thoughts crisp. These were the moments he had trained his entire adult life for, not for glory, but for necessity. As he settled into a new vantage point, he noticed one alien who hadn't panicked. This officer moved differently, calculated, observant, scanning not for motions but for patterns. He directed the others with sharp commands, maintaining structure despite the mounting fear. Cole recognized intelligence when he saw it. This one was dangerous. He prepared another shot, but the officer abruptly ducked behind a column, denying Cole a clean line. Cole adjusted, tracking him with patience. The rooftop echoed with the disarray of alien forces, their composure unraveling as each passing second exposed their vulnerability. Cole steadied himself for the next opening. The tide was turning, but the operation wasn't finished, not until command control was fully dismantled. And as he watched the remaining officers struggle to reorganize, he knew the most critical moments still lay ahead. Cole kept the calculating officer in his sights, waiting for the moment when hesitation or necessity would force the alien to reveal himself. The battlefield had shifted entirely. The once composed Aurelian command unit was now a scattered collection of frantic shapes darting between cover points they had never expected to need. Their earlier mockery had dissolved into shouts of alarm that echoed across the rooftops. Cole could sense their unraveling, but he also understood that desperation bred unpredictability. He couldn't afford complacency, not now, not with civilians still trying to slip through the district's broken alleys. The officer he had marked reemerged at last, edging along the side of a damaged comms terminal with measured care. Cole tightened his focus, but before he could line up the shot, a cluster of drones rose suddenly from behind the tower. These models were smaller than the broadcast units, sleeker, built for reconnaissance and counter-sniper action. Their sensors pulsed with scanning beams, sweeping across rooftops in expanding arcs. Cole suppressed a curse. The aliens had adapted quickly, faster than he preferred. The drones began triangulating potential firing points based on trajectory analysis, and although their calculations were crude compared to human ballistic software, they were narrowing possibilities with alarming speed. Cole slid backward, hugging the rooftop's natural contours, staying beneath the drones' scanning fields. He knew the city's architecture intimately. He'd trained on these very rooftops years before the occupation. The reflective surfaces of old HVAC panels created natural distortions for optical sensors, while the angled ductwork produced false positives when scanned. Using these obstacles like pieces on a board, Cole maneuvered between them with deliberate timing. The drones swept past him, their beams disrupted by the metallic clutter. He reached a narrow gap between two rusted pipes and positioned a reflective shard of glass at just the right angle to produce a signature that mimicked a rifle barrel. A moment later, the drones fired a salvo of sizzling plasma at the decoy, lighting the rooftop in harsh blue flashes. The distraction bought him seconds, enough for him to swing around behind a square maintenance structure and prepare a clear shot toward the officer, now issuing frantic commands to the drone operators. Cole inhaled, letting the noise of the drones fade into the background. The alien raised his arm to gesture toward the disturbance, exposing a vulnerability along the seam of his armor. Cole fired. The officer collapsed instantly, his body hitting the platform with a heavy thud. The remaining soldiers faltered, leadership shattered beyond repair. With their command structure gone, the Aurelians' cohesion dissolved entirely. Some attempted to retreat toward the tower's inner stairwell. Others fired wildly into the air as if they could intimidate an invisible enemy into revealing himself. Their panic spread downward to the troops patrolling the streets, who quickly lost any semblance of coordinated movement. Cole watched the breakdown with wary focus. Victory was close, but chaos had a way of spiraling into danger for anyone caught in its path. Movement below signaled the arrival of human resistance units advancing through newly opened channels. They moved fast, exploiting the confusion, clearing intersections with quiet efficiency. Cole spotted the civilians he had been monitoring earlier being ushered into a safer zone by the volunteers. His chest eased with a relief he didn't allow to reach his expression. He kept scanning for threats, refusing to let emotion dull his awareness. One last drone hovered near the administrative platform, its movements slow and uncertain without clear directives. Cole tracked its flight path, calculating angles. When it rotated to align with him, he fired a quick, precise shot that shattered its core processor. The machine spiraled downward, crashing beside the fallen officers. Silence gradually replaced the frantic commotion. Smoke drifted from scorched metal, curling through the thinning light as the city exhaled a long, exhausted breath. Cole rose from his position, stretching stiff muscles, and moved toward the rooftop's edge. Below, resistance fighters signaled victory, their voices muffled but unmistakably triumphant. Cole surveyed the reclaimed district. It was still broken, still scarred, but undeniably theirs again. He set his rifle across his shoulder and looked toward the horizon where the next battle surely waited. The city was far from saved, but this sector, this moment, belonged to humanity. And as he stepped back into position, ready to watch over those who still needed protection, he whispered words meant for no one but himself, his quiet affirmation of duty, resolve, and home.